G'day, welcome back to the Gunners Club, and wherever you are in the world and whenever you are, it's Saturday night and you're here right with us, sitting here at the bar.
Welcome back. What have you been up to?
Oh, I've had a great week. I'm going to ask you off the cuff.
Oh, God.
Who would be your three best British comedians? And when I say British, they might as well be the three best comedians of all time.
Oh, well, in actual fact, they probably are. Okay. Monty Python, Benny Hill, and just recently I've been introduced to, what's his name, John Carr?
Oh, okay.
On streaming video. Filthy jokes, right down my alley.
Well, I don't know if I'd call you a classicist, but you've named a couple of classics there. Myself, certainly, I think that some of the work that was done by Monty Python was amazing, groundbreaking, even timeless. I don't know if I'd give every single member of the cast there a ticket to play on the field next Sunday, but pretty much every single one of them. I love the work of Peter Cook as well. I think he was absolutely fantastic.
Yep.
The work he did both with Dudley Moore and the work he did by himself, particularly the first season of Blackadder, which I think is just an absolute scream.
Blackadder was seriously a classic.
So definitely I'd give Peter Cook a big pass there as well. I was very lucky though. This Monday I was in the presence of His Greatness, John Cleese.
Did you bow and scrape and walk backwards in his presence?
We don't really do that sort of thing anymore. And I think the reason for that has to do with the third great, who I haven't mentioned, which was Spike Milligan. Now, Spike Milligan for two reasons. Number one, because of the work he did with The Goon Show. And probably, because he was working with Peter Sellers, and Peter Sellers through the Pink Panther in film became even more successful probably than what he did. But all the scripts for The Goon Show were written by him. And, you play with the media that you've got. So at that time it was radio. And so you could have a sound of a whistle.
Well, that was for its time, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're in the trenches because you've heard a whistle, it's time for the boys to go over the top. Or you could hear the honking of a horn and imagine you're in a bicycle accident, whatever. You were taken out of the limitations of that media because they played right up to the limitations of it. So Goon Show certainly, very dated. But after that, he did that show called Q,
I've never heard of that.
First season was called Q5 and it went all up to Q9. It sort of confused people when it went to Q10, which was the sixth season, because suddenly you're in double digits. So they renamed it. There's a lot of it about. And being around you at the moment, Seuss, there is rather a lot of it about.
I don't know what you mean.
So I mention him simply because of the fact that when the boys who became Python got together and they had their fun to write the first season of Flying Circus, they'd watched Q5 and they rang each other up and said, "Do you see what he's just done? He's just done what we were about to do." So this was around 1969. So a lot of those boys from the Python troupe had been doing work before. They'd been writing scripts for the Frost Report, the 1948 show as well. All of these sorts of shows, a lot of the material that Ronnie Barker and Robbie Corbett did.
Yes.
That was done with them, and Tin Book Taylor was part of it, who you know from the Goodies. So they didn't come out as fresh-faced virgins. They'd actually been doing the work for a number of years. But they were influenced by people like Spike Milligan.
But they really came into their own when they came together as a troupe to do the Monty Python.
I think so too.
That was just amazing. And they really pushed the boundaries. I mean, if you take Benny Hill, for example, there is no way in hell you would get away with what Benny Hill did then today.
I don't know how new he was. I mean, it's that all slapstick vaudeville. Vaudeville simply from the French voix de ville, the voice of the village. So it was every man's sort of humour. When I went to see Ben Elton live in Bendigo a couple of years ago, he stood on stage and said, "I'm the greatest sitcom writer of all time." And actually, you know what, he actually probably is. And he says, "You know what, people say I killed Benny Hill."
Yeah.
And indirectly, at least he killed the humour of Benny Hill. I'd say not for the greatest. I would say the two biggest waves of humour we've had from Britain have been that time of Spike Milligan going from the Goon Show, the Q Show, into Monty Python. And then the second lot of that, and that one particularly because it dethroned our deference that we had to the crown and to the monarchy and to authority. Remember, Britain was pulling itself out of the Second World War,
Yep.
that wartime mentality. And then I'd say the second major change was the time of Ben Elton, when it was really starting to introduce this idea of, I guess, new wave. And you know, John Cleese, he said, look, we can tell jokes about each other. We don't have to be politically correct. These maniacs believe that being kind to other people has only been introduced in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
And he went on to tell some jokes about certain groups, which I even identify as being part of. And I've told them on to other people because they're so funny.
He really is. He was and is still ahead of his time, I believe, John Cleese.
I noticed just off camera, you can't see it, but you can right now. You've got a John Cleese clock where he's doing the funny walks, and so his legs are pointing to the hour and to the minutes, if you know this sketch. So here's my question to you then. What's your favourite film or sketch from the Python Boys?
It's got to be Life of Brian,
Yeah.
and it's so relevant to today.
More and more and more.
Where he wants to be a woman, wants to be identified as Loretta.
And you know, if you want to, that's fine. I know that we've got audience who identify as a Manhattan skyline, and that makes no odds to me whatsoever at all. But what he was basically showing us live on stage was humour is supposed to be there to break bounds, and it's supposed to actually needle each other so that we understand who we are, and we can understand and appreciate the differences as well. And I thought that was fantastic. And you know what? He's busy with his daughter from his second wife.
Doing
Camilla?
next Fawlty Towers?
Can you believe it?
How good is that?
Yeah.
I wonder if it'll live up to expectations and be as good as the first season.
Well, this one, here's the goss, because I heard it from his godhead's voice just Monday. It's going to be set in the Caribbean, most likely, at a bijou-style boutique
Okay.
place. Can I tell you,
Yeah, but what part is he going to play? He can't possibly...
same man, he's still playing Basil.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so instead of having Polly working there, essentially that's going to be replaced by Camilla, who's his daughter. And let me tell you, she had a great role to play on stage. She did a lot of prompting him and fielding the questions from the group, from the audience, etc. She's got his height, and she appreciates the fact that she's a very tall woman, and she thinks it's a gift and a curse. She has got gallows humour, very black, streaky gallows humour, which I think is fantastic.
I think I'm liking her already,
Yeah,
and
so
I have never even seen her, so I'm thinking I'm already empathising with her.
Yes.
Did you like that? Did you hear what I just said? Empathise. This was me saying that.
I think his evening school classes have really come along. But she's got that same gallows humour. She inherited also the height and the humour, so I think that's just fantastic. But it was a great night. You know what I feel after having been there? It was not a lot of new material. A lot of it was basically he was showing old videos, particularly things like the funeral of Graham Chapman, where he goes on stage at a talk show in America, and they've got the ashes, and there's a lovely portrait, and halfway through, one of the members gets up and accidentally kicks over the urn, and the ashes are everywhere, and he's there and he's trying to shield what's going on. They've got the dust buster vac, and they've got everything going on. And that's what it's all about. It's sharing humour. It's sharing the fact we're human. And kindness didn't exist just 3 years ago. Let's get on with the show. And that's really, he's still got that true vein of humour in him. And we don't want to lose that.
Oh, no, definitely not. But with the way politics are going today, we may not have a choice.
No, it's gone mad. And you put your hand up for it or you don't, and I don't.
No, exactly.
But great comedy shows. I think that was a wonderful comedy. Seeing Ben Elton on stage at the Alhambra Theatre in Bendigo was fantastic, because he was going back to the idea of what it was like when you go and visit your nana and she'd be in a nursing home, and they'd have the balloons and the games and that sort of stuff, and they'd be playing music from the era of the grandparents, so there might be a bit of Elvis or stuff like that. And he's saying, what are people going to be listened to today? Because It's all the rap and the Murray Farquhar blue language that they're using.
Yeah.
And at the very end of the show, he said, all right, there, Gladys, put your hands up, or let me help you. And he's helping this old lady dance along to it. And there's a rap star in the background saying, come on, you Murray Farquhar, blah, blah, to the left, to the right. And at the end, the whole entourage basically kicked off with their legs, almost like a conga line, to that rap song and singing the obscenities along as well. And I guess that's really where our society is bringing us to today.
I don't want to get old anymore. That's it. I refuse.
Yeah, I don't think we've got
Hang on,
much
it
choice.
might be a bit late.
Some of the Dad's Army shows have been turning up on my YouTube feed, and how fantastic.
They are brilliant.
And sometimes I felt with the equipment that we had back in the army, it wasn't 100% removed from it at that very time. There's one fantastic episode where instead of having the proper radio equipment, they're using tin cans with a piece of string and making sure that the jam jars, because you used to get jam in tins, believe it or not, are strung tight so they can hear each other and doing all that sort of stuff. And I think that from memory, Godfrey revealed that his middle name actually was Roger, and running at the end of every acknowledgement of the radio if it was going to cause any sort of problem. But you want to know my favourite scene of Monty Python?
Captain Darling.
Yeah, how can you go past... I think... I wouldn't say that every single season of Blackadder was fantastic. The first one is my favourite, followed by the fourth season. I think the second and third are probably line ball. The fourth season was a real tour de force. It really came back.
Yes.
It came back home. And probably because Ben Elton wrote the second, third and fourth, he co-wrote those. And so it was very different to, I think, the feeling of the first one that I loved. But my favourite Monty Python sketch was the philosophers playing football. And it was the Greek philosophical side against the German.
Okay, I'm not sure I'm
so if you like
fully up
highbrow
to that with that one.
and low ball together, I think that's where it comes. And if you want a more famous one, I think the fish slap dance.
Oh, yeah. No, the lumberjack. Google the lumberjack song.
That's right, song. Yeah.
The lumberjack song on YouTube.
I know, this is odd. So I'm a big Paul McCartney fan. I've got, I think, pretty much every album he's ever done, apart from his classic works. The last concert I was front row, that's how big a fan I am. But I'm going to ask you, and I have a sneaking suspicion I know who your favourite Beatle was.
It's got to be McCartney.
Because I'd say at least a strong second for you would be George Harrison.
Yes.
Yeah.
But McCartney, definitely my favourite. Harrison really came into his own when the Beatles split up.
Yes, yeah.
He really did come into his own, and he wrote, I believe he wrote them. He wrote some really good shit.
Oh, definitely. I mean...
And it surprised me, because to me, it was always Lennon and McCartney that wrote everything.
Yeah. And then the All Things Must Pass album comes out and the world's saying, my God, we thought this was the album that McCartney would write. And Lennon's albums basically weren't selling that strongly in the 70s at all, in fact, really below expectation. And then even in the 80s, the work that Harrison was doing by himself, things like the Cloud 9 album and the project with the Travelling Wilburys, just shocked the world.
That was brilliant. That was brilliant too.
So I bring him up because I know you love him. I know in your collection you've got the greatest hits of George Harrison, which is probably your most played ex-Beatles album. The money that he put in to make that Life of Brian. So this story was told on stage by John Cleese. He said, God bless him, God bless George Harrison for what he did, because without him, we wouldn't have had that film. It was all set up, the studios had approved the finance, and were they ready to make the film? And then we get the phone call, we've read the script, we can't approve this because it was just too much out there. It stood on too many toes.
Oh, with The Life of Brian, yes, of course.
And then he gets the call the next week that George Harrison has seen the script, and he's mortgaged his house, and you're off to Tunisia to make the film.
I didn't know that.
And I said, what do you mean we're off to make it? Yeah. You mean he's okay with it? Yeah. And I asked him, why? And he said, I'd like to see the film. So John Cleese says it's the most expensive ticket ever bought to see that movie was George Harrison.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So the only reason we got The Life of Brian is because of George Harrison.
George Harrison. So it all
Well,
comes
bugger
around.
me.
Everything great comes around and just gets better and better. We would love to know what your favourite comedies are, English or otherwise, particularly English, because, look, I grew up in a time where the Australian Broadcasting Commission was also known as instead of the ABC, the ABBC, because it was basically we're just buying the BBC product
exactly.
and slap our logo on it.
That was before they became woke.
Yeah, I certainly don't support the ABC or watch their product at all, and I resent paying my money towards them. Like I've said before, and actually a friend grabbed me by the ear yesterday, I went for dinner with a friend, and he said, Gunnar, I love you've talked about politics, I love what you've said. And I said in that video, we're not backwards and coming forwards as to how we feel. Whether you like our brand of politics or not, you're still welcome to join us, you're still on board with us.
And I hope if you're spending your Saturday night with us, you raise a glass, you have a drink, enjoy yourself. And don't forget to like and subscribe. You're always welcome at the Gunners Club.
See ya.
Have a good one.